22. Women and the Church. The place of women in the history of the Church has been a varied one. Although biblical faith accords them a very high place, other influences have undermined that fact. The Hellenic tradition, especially Neoplatonism, gave preeminence to spiritual things, to ideas, and men were seen as more rational and hence higher, whereas women had an ostensibly lower status. The Enlightenment, with its rationalism, had a like impact. Men were seen as the embodiment of reason, and hence higher on the scale of being, whereas women were seen as essentially emotional, and hence lower. The Bible, however, gives a different perspective. Women are different from men, even to the cells of their bodies, so that the differences are very real. They are, however, essentially one. They are man, the human being created in God's image. They are subordinate to men, not inferior. There is a difference between the two concepts. Proverbs chapter 31 verses 10 to 31 makes clear the status of women was a high one. The wife ran the farms, businesses, and estates when her husband sat in the gates, Proverbs chapter 31 verse 23, as either a ruler, elder of the city, or as a judge. While normally God used men as prophets, his use of Deborah, Miriam, and Huldah caused no dismay or surprise among a people taught to view women in God's revealed terms. The plain teaching of Genesis chapter 2 verses 21 to 24 is the unity of male and female in God. The idea of the war of the sexes is a product of sin, so that both the idea and the fact of such conflict reflect a fallen world and are evil. The respect for women is a matter of biblical law. Widows represent women at their most vulnerable point. God is emphatic about his severe judgment on any nation that afflicts widows and orphans, as witness Exodus chapter 22 verses 22 to 24, Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 29, chapter 16 verses 11 and 14, chapter 24 verse 17, Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 6, etc. This same concern appears in James chapter 1 verse 27. Our Lord condemns the Pharisees for their exploitation of widows. Mark chapter 12 verse 40. Before the church had a building or any formal organization beyond the 12 apostles, it was caring for widows materially. Acts chapter 6 verses 1 to 4. The diaconate was created to expedite that care. This care and activity clearly went beyond the work of the male deacons and was also carried on by women, as witness the work of Dorcas. Acts chapter 9 verse 36 to 43. All the widows of Joppa within the church circle witnessed to Peter of the activities of Tabitha or Dorcas. In 1 Timothy chapter 5 verses 9 and 10, we see that an order of widows existed, widows of 60 years or older, who were active in the ministry to needs and in hospitality. There was, thus, an actual organization of women in this service. These women were called deaconesses. Some churches today are very hostile to the, quote, office, end quote, because all, quote, offices, end quote, have a voice in the government of the church. This problem is a local and denominational one, and not related to the biblical data. What is clear is that Paul, in Romans chapter 16 verse 1, refers to Phoebe as a diakonon of the assembly or ecclesias in Kenkre. The King James translates diakonon as servant, a servant of the church. However, if Paul had meant the word diakonon to mean the more general servant, he would have said servant of the Lord not of the church. By relating diakonon to ecclesias, he is marking it as an, quote, office, end quote, of the church. The evidence points to such an office. About 111 AD, Pliny, governor of Bithynia, questioned under torture two maidservants about Christian meetings. These two were called ministri, deaconesses. Epistles, 96. This alone is perhaps not conclusive, but even in our Lord's ministry, the 12 disciples were sometimes accompanied by women who had given themselves, like the disciples, to the Lord's service. Luke chapter 8, verses 1 to 3. The deaconess, thus, was an important part of the church's ministry. At the same time, it was a very practical office. It provided for widows while giving them a place of service within the church and an income. Paul is very explicit. Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren, the elder women as mothers, the younger as sisters, with all purity. Honour widows that are widows indeed. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home, and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. Now she that is a widow indeed, and desolate, trusteth in God, and continueth in supplications and prayers night and day. But she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth. And these things give in charge, that they may be blameless. But if any provide not for his own, and specially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith, and is worse than an infidel. Let not a widow be taken into the number under 60 years old, having been the wife of one man. Well reported of for good works. If she have brought up children, if she have lodged strangers, if she have washed the saints' feet, if she have relieved the afflicted, if she have diligently followed every good work. But the younger widows refuse, for when they have begun to wax wanton against Christ, they will marry, having damnation, because they have cast off their first faith. And, withal, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. I will, therefore, that the younger woman marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. For some are already turned aside after Satan. If any man or woman that believeth have widows, let them relieve them, and let not the church be charged, that it may relieve them that are widows indeed. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verses 1 to 16. Paul is here counselling Timothy as a pastor with respect to his relationship to members of a particular kind. First, he is told not to go at an elder roughshod. The rebuke is to be with respect to the fact that every man is an elder before God. Age is no immunity against rebuke, but age requires respect all the same. The same is true of all older women. Younger women are to be treated as sisters, and with purity. Second, Paul discusses widows in the church. There are 4 kinds of widows in view. A. Widows who have children, and or relatives who care for them. This is a necessary Christian duty, and failure to do so makes one worse than an infidel. B. There are young widows, whose basic desire is to marry again. These need financial and other aid, but to make them a member of the order is to invite trouble and hypocrisy, because they perhaps will desert if any opportunity to remarry presents itself. C. There are needy widows to be cared for, but who are not of a calibre to be included in the order. These need support, but not inclusion in the order. D. There are widows over 60 whose character is excellent. They have the attestation of such things as good works, rearing children, washing the disciples' feet, relieving the needy and afflicted, and being generally a blessing. Paul does not cite these as each a requirement, but as areas of investigation. Was the woman as a wife one who was mindful of the needs of other believers, helpful and gracious? If she had children, did she rear them well? It was the custom, since travel on dusty roads left sandaled feet dirty, to have a servant wash a guest's feet. Some, lacking or in the absence of servants, omitted this task. An example of this unwillingness we find in John chapter 13, verses 4 to 15. None of the disciples were willing to assume the task, and our Lord washed the feet of all. Had the widow manifested such grace and courtesy? That is, in acts of like humility and thoughtfulness? Clearly, superior women alone were to be admitted. In verses 3 and 5, the real widows are those without descendants. They are particularly to be honoured, especially if their estate has led them to supplications and prayers night and day for the Lord's work, instead of bitterness. Whereas Hebrew women saw childlessness as a curse, Paul here says that such childless women are especially to be honoured and respected when their condition has led to a greater reliance on God. Psalm 127 verse 3 is clear that children can be a blessing. Paul makes clear that childlessness can also be blessed of God, and is to be honoured where grace marks it. Hospitality was and is a requirement of all believers. Presbyters were to set an example therein. 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 2. So too were those women who became members of the order. Their past life must reveal gracious hospitality towards Christ's family. The early church at times read Paul's words too literally. They barred women who had borne no children, for example, and required very exact compliance to the details of verse 10, but soon less strict compliance to the age requirements. As time passed, younger women were admitted, and then young virgins, first as aids to the older widows, and then as members of the order. The rise of convents came out of this development. In origin, the widows taught women and visited them, as well as martyrs and confessors who were under sentence or in prison. The government of the other widows, not in the order, was in their hands, and a ministry generally to women and children, which included teaching. The term wife of one man is not a ban on second marriages, but rather, like the term, the husband of one wife, in 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 2, means faithful to one's spouse at all times. A key point in Paul's statement is verse 13, which is plainly applied to all women. Assistance and guidance are to be given by godly women one to another, without intermeddling, gossiping, and backbiting. Paul sees women and men alike as essentially family members. The church is Christ's family, and we are to be members one of another. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25. The Bible sees the family as basic to the life of both men and women, and it is clear that the church is the Lord's family. The present downgrading of the family is totally anti-biblical. The widows or deaconesses, like the elders, deacons, and all men and women, are to manifest the family virtues one towards another. Life within the family is true life, and the highest manifestation of family life is within the family of God the Father.